Hello, and welcome to our training session on SAFARIS, the Spatial Analytic Framework for Advanced Risk Information Systems, Tools for Forecasting Box Tree Moth Activity. The link to the SAFARIS homepage and a screenshot of what that looks like is shown here, and we'll include this link in the description below. Here's an overview of what our talk will cover today. First, I'll describe some of the ways that our tools can help you in your planning. Then I'll give you a brief introduction to SAFARIS. I'll walk us through Pestcast, a tool for forecasting the emergence of adult box tree moths across the country. Then I'll describe the box tree moth larval activity tool that you can use to predict when larvae will first begin feeding after winter. First, let's talk about how these tools can help you. Effective monitoring and management require planning and good timing. These data-driven tools can help you plan your timing of monitoring and management activities for box tree moth. And better yet, these tools are spatial. That means that the answers to questions like, when should I plan on putting traps out to first catch the first flying adults? Or when will pesticide applications be most effective in spring, are customized to your specific location using local weather conditions and past weather data. Throughout this talk, I'll be using a location in Cincinnati, Ohio, pictured here in the circle in the center, as an example, but you can input any location in the continuous United States into these tools. But before we talk about using Pestcast to plan trapping or using the larval activity tool to predict larval activity after winter, let's meet SAFARIS. SAFARIS is an acronym that stands for the Spatial Analytic Framework for Advanced Risk Information Systems. This is a cooperative agreement between Plant Protection and Quarantine and North Carolina State University with the goal of providing a web-based framework to meet the predictive modeling and mapping needs of PPQ. This diagram describes the SAFARIS framework, which is a collection of models, analytic tools, data drivers, and pest-specific products. Together, the elements in SAFARIS allow us to create the two box tree moth tools we'll be talking about today. If you select the Pest Products tab on SAFARIS, you'll see the collection of pest-specific map products available in SAFARIS, arranged by pest name, along with a description of each product type. For box tree moth, we'll start with Pestcast. For pests that are present in the United States, Pestcast is used to forecast insect life stages across the country. By using degree-day models, near real-time weather data, 7-day weather forecasts, and 20 years of historical weather data, we produce maps daily that predict the life stage of a pest today, over the next week, and over the next month. To see the list of pests that we've developed Pestcast products for, select Pestcast from the drop-down list of pest products. This will open the landing page for available Pestcast products. Let's look at the Pestcast for box tree moth. This is a screenshot of the Pestcast page for box tree moth. Let's walk through the Pestcast interface. At the top of the page, there's a box that shows the date that the map was produced. This defaults to yesterday, but if you'd like to look at a map for a date in the past, you can change the date by clicking in the calendar icon to the right of the date box. On the top right-hand side, there's a link to the methodology document, which will open in a new tab when you click it. This document summarizes the research we conducted to create the degree-day model we used to create the Pestcast map. It lists the parameters used in our model and describes the weather data sources and processing we used. The legend shows the life stage predictions and degree-day thresholds we used for each stage. Although the box tree moth has not been detected in the southern United States, it is useful to see how these predictions work across the country. On this date in late May, we can see that if box tree moth were present in the southern United States, the second generation of adults would have already emerged in the South. The second generation would be expected to emerge next month in the band that stretches from North Carolina west to the Texas Panhandle. A small band just north of that would be starting to see adult emergence on this date, while a larger band that runs from West Virginia through central Kansas would be predicted to see the first generation of adults emerge in the next week. These maps are interactive, so next I'll point out the map controls available on the page. In the upper left, there are buttons to zoom in or out on the map or display it in full screen. At the bottom left, there is a slider bar that controls the transparency. By making it transparent, you can see cities, roads, and other landmarks that help you find specific locations that interest you. If you have the latitude and longitude coordinates for a place that you are interested in, you can click in the box in the lower left and type in those coordinates. This will place a marker on the map as shown in this inset at the bottom for our Ohio location. In the upper right, there are checkboxes to turn on the state and county boundaries. Just below that is a box that will tell you where your cursor is located on the map. All of these map controls are useful for selecting a specific location to examine the Compare tool, which is what we'll discuss next. When you click on a location in the map, a text box will pop up that tells you the county, state, and coordinates of the location. Here we've selected our Cincinnati, Ohio spot in Hamilton County, as shown in the inset to the right. On the state, May 31st, 2023, this location has accumulated 462.54 degree days. It is predicted to accumulate 563.76 degree days in the next week and 877.34 degree days in the next month. This means that box tree moth adults are expected to begin to emerge in the next week here at this location. On the left side of the map, where the cursor icon is, there's a button that reads Compare. Clicking on this will display a graph that lets you compare the current and forecasted degree day accumulation at this location to past years. This graph shows degree day accumulation at your selected location in near real time. The data for this year is current as of yesterday. I took this screenshot of the graph for a Cincinnati location on March 4th, 2024. So we have actual accumulated degree data up to March 3rd, which is shown with a solid green line. After that date, we have predictions over the next month, shown in a dashed gray line. Calendar dates are on the bottom axis, and you can zoom to specific dates using the slider under the axis. Degree day accumulation is on the vertical axis. We selected the current year, 3 years prior, and the 10-year average to compare on the graph by checking the boxes in the menu at the top. Overall, we see that degree days accumulated much faster in 2023 than our 10-year average, and much slower in 2021. You can move your cursor over the lines to display current and historical degree day accumulation. Looking at our predicted accumulation in the next month, which is April 1st in this example, we see that we're on track for a faster accumulation of degree days this year than in years past. This information can help you plan when you'll need to have traps out in the field to catch the first flying adults. You can use the degree day accumulation in past years to help in your planning. Moving along the timeline past the 30-day prediction for this year, we can see when there were enough degree days for adult emergence at this location in the past. The first image on the left shows the date that the 513 degree day threshold was crossed in 2022. This was on June 2nd, which is also the 10-year average date. The image in the middle shows when this threshold was crossed in 2023 on June 3rd. The last image shows that this threshold was crossed on June 8th in 2021. Using this tool, we can say that in the last 3 years, box tree moths had accumulated enough degree days to emerge as adults by early June. At the bottom of the Pestcast page, there is a list of files that you can download for any date of interest. Select one or more of these files by checking on the box to the left, then click the Download PDF button. This will open a window prompting you to select the location on your computer that you would like to save the PDF file. The PDF that is saved looks like the one here on the right. This map shows the adult emergence forecast map that was produced on May 31st, 2023 for the contiguous United States. These documents are useful for sharing by email or in print. Next, we'll talk about the box tree moth larval activity tool. You can activate the box tree moth larval activity tool by selecting that option from the Pest Products drop-down menu, as shown in the upper right. Box tree moths spend the winter in a larval stage within box tree leaves, covered with silken threads like these in the picture. When temperatures rise in the springtime, they'll become active again and begin to feed. If we know when larvae will begin to feed again, we can more effectively time our applications of pesticides, targeting feeding immature stages, like BT. Using the same predictive weather data as in Pestcast, the box tree larval activity tool can help predict the dates that the larvae will start actively feeding at a specific user-selected location. While Pestcast predictions are based on degree day models, the box tree larval activity tool uses a temperature threshold approach. In the paper cited at the bottom of the screen, French researchers showed that when temperatures hit 10 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, box tree moth larvae will become active and begin to feed. But temperatures fluctuate a lot from day to day, especially in the springtime. If we would like to apply pesticides that do target feeding larvae, it may be best to wait until temperatures are generally above our 10-degree threshold, rather than applying them the first day that we reach that 10-degree threshold. Therefore, we have used this 10-degree threshold in 3 different ways to help predict when larvae will be actively feeding at a location. For each year since 2001, the tool reports the first date that the temperature reaches 10 degrees at this location, the first week that the average temperature is 10 degrees, and the first date that temperatures are 10 degrees for 3 consecutive days. This is a screenshot of the interface for the box tree moth larval activity tool. Next, we'll walk through the interface. At the top of the page, there's a box that shows the date the map was produced. The tool is updated daily and defaults to yesterday's date. You can change the date by clicking in the calendar icon to the right of the date box. On the top right-hand side, there's a link to the methodology document. Click on this and a PDF document will open in a new tab. This document summarizes the research behind the tool, the 3 different approaches that we used, and the weather data sources and processing we used. The legend shows that the map displays yesterday's daily mean temperature in Celsius across the country in 10-degree increments. At a glance, you can see where in the country the mean temperature exceeded 10 degrees Celsius for the day before. For example, on this date, daily mean temperatures in the southern United States were between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius yesterday. The map controls are the same as those in Pestcast. You can zoom in or out or display the map in full screen using the buttons in the upper left. The slider bar at the bottom left controls the transparency, so you can look at landmarks under the temperature layer. Click in the coordinate box in the lower left, and you can type latitude and longitude coordinates for a location of interest, and a marker, like the one in the circular inset at the bottom of the screen, will appear on the map. In the upper right, there are checkboxes that you can use to make state and county lines visible. The controls can help you select your location to activate the Compare tool and generate a table of box tree moth larval activity dates. Here, we added a marker at the same location in Cincinnati, Ohio, that we explored in the Pestcast tool by typing in the latitude and longitude coordinates in the boxes at the bottom left. This shows up more clearly in the inset at the bottom, which is a screenshot of that marker, zoomed in with the transparency on. We'll use this location to examine the 2 ways that you can explore predictions of when box tree moth larvae will become active at this location. We'll start with the Compare tool, which has the same interface as the one on Pestcast. First, click on the map to select your location. Here we selected that Ohio location again. Then click on the tab that reads Compare on the left side of the map. I've shown an enlarged version of that tab here next to the cursor. Like in Pestcast, this tab opens a graph that lets you compare the current and forecasted temperatures at this location to past years. We're just going to focus on the current year to see how to use this graph. The timeline at the bottom of the graph shows the year, starting on the 1st of January. The vertical axis, T-mean, shows the daily average temperature at this location. As the legend shows, the red line is the record of what the daily mean temperature actually was recorded as up to yesterday's date. The dark gray shows the predicted mean temperature for the upcoming week, and the light gray shows the predicted temperature over the next month. Use your cursor to look at the daily temperature more closely. We created this graph on April 14th, 2024. On that date, yesterday's mean temperature was 21.5 degrees Celsius. That is definitely above our 10-degree threshold for box tree moth larval activity. But let's look at what the weather prediction is for the coming week. Moving our cursor along the graph, we see that the weekly forecast says that temperatures are going to be much lower, dropping to 8.9 degrees Celsius in the week. That dip in temperatures is likely going to be short-lived. When we move a little further down the timeline, we see that temperatures are predicted to remain above our 10-degree threshold for the upcoming month. But how can we use this to know when to expect box tree moth larvae to become active in the spring? We could add previous years and explore the timeline. Here I've added the data for 2023 by checking the box. This adds a line in yellow to show daily mean temperatures that were recorded at this location in 2023. The first day that the daily mean temperature was over 10 degrees in 2023 was January 4th, marked with a black arrow here. In 2024, this happened 3 weeks later on January 26th, also marked with a black arrow. While the graph can be used to explore trends in temperature and provide predictions up to a month ahead for the current year, we have an additional tool that makes planning for larval activity much easier. Let's look at that next. To use this tool, we'll need to type in the coordinates for our location in the box at the top left on the box tree moth larval activity tool page. Then click the button that says Submit. We'll use our Cincinnati, Ohio location again for this tool. This will generate a table like the one shown here that lists the dates starting in 2001 that each of our three 10-degree thresholds were met each year. Next, let's walk through this table. For the next few slides, I'll highlight the columns that we're discussing by shading the rest in gray. The first column is simple enough. It shows the year. The next two columns show the first date the daily mean temperatures were over 10 degrees Celsius in that year. The first column is the date that this temperature occurred, and the next is the daily mean temperature. I've highlighted the first entry in the table for 2001 with an orange box. The first time in the year that the temperature reached 10 degrees Celsius was on February 9th. On that day, the temperature was 11.11 degrees Celsius. Looking down the columns for entries in other years, the first date at this location varies pretty widely from year to year, occurring as early as January 1st in 2007, marked with the red arrow, and as late as March 16th in 2003, marked with the blue arrow. The next two columns show the weekly date. This is the first week that had an average temperature over 10 degrees Celsius in that year. The first column is the first date that the weekly mean temperature was over 10 degrees Celsius, and the next column shows the weekly mean temperature that occurred. I've highlighted the first entry in the table, again with an orange box. In 2001, April 7th was the first day in the year in which the average temperature over a 7-day period reached 10 degrees Celsius. That week, the average temperature was 10.80 degrees Celsius. This weekly date is a bit more consistent than the first date at this location and usually occurs between March and April. The last two columns show the 3-day date. This is the first day that the average daily temperature was over 10 degrees Celsius for 3 consecutive days. In the last column, we see the 3 temperatures that crossed our 10 degrees Celsius threshold. In 2001, the first year in the table, the first day that the temperatures were over 10 degrees for 3 days straight was on April 8th. This threshold is similar to the weekly date, with some odd exceptions. For example, I've highlighted the 3-day date for 2008 with a blue arrow. In 2008, 3 days over 10 degrees Celsius happened as early as January 9th, although looking through the other entries, it usually occurred at March in our Cincinnati location. Having over 20 years of the dates that box tree moth larvae likely could become active at your location can help you plan on when you need to apply pesticides that target feeding larvae before next spring. To download the table in Excel spreadsheet format, scroll to the bottom of the page and click the Download Excel button. This will open a new window for you to indicate where the file should be saved. The file name will show the latitude and longitude of the location for which the table was generated. Next, I'll show you one way I use this to determine the likely dates of larval activity at this location. This graph shows the 3 methods we can use to predict when box tree moth larvae will become active again in the spring. Year is on the bottom axis, starting in 2001 and running through the current year, 2024. The vertical axis shows Julian day, which is the number of days since January 1st each year. The points show the date that each threshold was met, with blue indicating the first date, orange showing the weekly date, and yellow showing the 3-day date. The lines show the average date that threshold was met over the 24-year period. Let's highlight those average dates one by one. Here I've grayed out two of our approaches so that we can focus on first date, shown here in blue. At this location, we can see that over the last 24 years, the average first date, that is the average date that the daily mean temperature was over 10 degrees Celsius, is January 27th. Next, let's focus on the weekly date, shown here in orange. The average weekly date, that is the date that marks the first time in a year that the mean temperature was 10 degrees Celsius over a 7-day period, happens much later in the spring at this location, on March 22nd. Lastly, let's look at the average 3-day date, shown here in yellow. The 3-day date is the first time in the year that daily temperatures were over 10 degrees Celsius for 3 days in a row, which on average happens at March 17th. This is slightly earlier than the weekly date at our Cincinnati location. These predictions can help us plan for treatment applications before box tree moth larvae become active after remaining dormant over the winter. Although we might see some larval activity in late January at this location, we expect that applications would be most effective in mid to late March. The two box tree moth larval activity tools, the table of past dates and the compare tool that shows near real-time temperatures, can be used together to help plan treatment schedules before larvae start feeding in the spring. Let's review what we covered in this training. First, we learned what kinds of questions these tools can help you answer for box tree moth. Next, we had a brief introduction to Sepharis, a web-based framework to assist in spatial analyses of pest risk. Then we learned how Pestcast can predict box tree moth life stages and help us to plan for monitoring adult flight periods. Lastly, we learned how to use the box tree moth larval activity tool to predict when larvae will resume feeding after winter. We still have a lot to learn about the box tree moth. For now, we have these 3 thresholds that we can use to predict larval activity, but ideally, we'd like to have a more precise prediction. Once we can add in more field observations on when larvae resume feeding in the spring, we can likely refine this tool and offer a single prediction date. Any updates to the tools will be on the Sepharis site, so stay tuned. Thank you for taking the time to learn about these tools. That concludes our presentation.